Welcome, everyone. I am Barrister Mohammad Fariduddin. In my last video clip, I have ended my discussion about the ancient classification pronounced by Aristotle, and this brings us to the discussion of various types of constitutions from the modern perspective. In this video, I will discuss various types of constitutions from the modern perspective. One modern classification is that constitution can be rigid or flexible. This classification rests primarily on the process of constitutional amendment. The question is whether the process of constitutional amendment is identical with the process of ordinary lawmaking. The constitution that can be altered or amended by following the ordinary lawmaking process without any special machinery is a flexible constitution. On the other hand, the constitution that requires a special procedure for its alteration or amendment is a rigid constitution. In the case of the United Kingdom, the Parliament is required to follow the same legislative procedure whether the law to be passed or amended concerns constitutional significance or an ordinary law. Same procedure has to be followed. So, the United Kingdom's constitution is a flexible constitution. On the other hand, those constitutions that can be altered only after following a special procedure that is different and usually more stringent to pass than the ordinary law are called rigid constitutions. More often than not, written constitutions provide for their own amendment procedure. Thus, all or many of the constitutional rules will be entrenched. That means the Constitution either will stipulate the stringent procedures to be followed for amendment, or in some cases called basic structure of the Constitution, like independence of the judiciary. No amendment will be allowed at all, because the written constitutions state what powers the Parliament possesses, and if the latter goes beyond these, it is not amending, but in fact breaking the Constitution. In brief, then, we may say that the Constitution that cannot be bent without being broken is a rigid Constitution. The constitutions of the United States of America and Bangladesh, for example, are rigid constitutions because there are special procedures for amendment. For Bangladesh, 3/4 majority is required for amending a constitution. A further classification of constitutions that is adopted refers to a constitution as being either monarchical or republic. A republican constitution provides for the post of a president. Presidential office is a symbol of statehood. In the name of the state, the president will enter into treaties, make declarations of war, and represent the state on formal international and domestic occasions. In some countries, the president is effectively head of the state and the head of the government as well. This is the position in, for example, the United States of America and South Africa. In other states, the president may be the head of the state, but may not be the head of the government. This is the position, for example, in India and Bangladesh, where the head of the government is the Prime Minister. And that is why these are called parliamentary system or the cabinet form of government. The United Kingdom's constitution is monarchical. The Queen is the figurehead, the symbol of nationhood. She represents her country on a domestic and international level. All acts of government are undertaken in the name of the Crown. The Queen is unelected and unaccountable to the electorate. But the United Kingdom is a constitutional monarchy, that is to say, a limited monarchy. Limited monarchy means the Queen reigns in accordance with the Constitution. Limited also signifies that in practice there is very little that the Queen can do of her own volition. It is Her Majesty's elected government rather than Her Majesty personally which makes the important decisions and exercise real executive power. So, a division based upon such terms as monarchy and republic has now become obsolete. Taking as example as Great Britain and France, we should hereby be misled into supposing that the executive in the first case is the king, in the second case, the president. Now, neither of these things is true. On the contrary, the executive in both cases is the cabinet of ministers. The king and the president of the United Kingdom and France, respectively, being politically considered powerless against the decisions of their ministers. That means the cabinet as a whole, which is headed by the Prime Minister. The last king of England who tried actually to interfere in the works of the executive was George III, and he quite failed to achieve his purpose. The last president in France who tried to interfere in the work of the executive was M. Millerand, and for so doing he was forced to resign. Therefore, today a more meaningful division based on the executive will be between parliamentary or cabinet form of government and presidential form of government. In a parliamentary or cabinet form of government, the executive is responsible to the parliament, that means the legislature, which has the power to remove the executive should it lose the confidence of the parliament. On the other hand, in a presidential form of government, the President is not responsible to the Parliament and is not removable by the Parliament because he or she is directly responsible to the people through periodic elections. Therefore, it is clear that all states in which the executive is responsible to the elected assembly of parliament falls to a distinct category. This type of government is alternately known as cabinet government. The United Kingdom, Canada, India, Bangladesh, etc. are examples of systems of parliamentary, executive, or cabinet governments. The United States of America is an example of presidential system of government. In the United States, the president and his ministers form the executive, but far from the ministers being subject to the will of the Congress, that is to say Parliament, they are not allowed to speak or vote in either House of Representatives or the Senate. The House of Representatives and the Senate are the two branches of the Congress. Congress is the Parliament of the USA. The only personal contact between the executive and the legislature in the United States of America lies through the president's message to Congress that is delivered once a year. However, if unusual circumstances demand that he should meet it in special occasions, then more than one address can be delivered. That is exceptional case. The check upon the executive in this case lies in the election of the president that takes place between every 4 years. But the president, once elected, may select or dismiss his ministers subject to the approval of the Senate, and nothing can remove the President of the United States during the fixed term of his office except actual misconduct for which he can be impeached. That is to say, he can be tried by Congress, and at the end of his term, whether he stays or goes depends solely on the will of the people as expressed in the election. But no president can stand for election after serving 2 terms of presidency. Countries are run by constitutions and sometimes are creations of constitutions. So you should also have some ideas about different types of countries existing in modern times. Countries can be federal or unitary. A federal country is one in which a number of coordinate states unite for certain common purpose. And after the creation of the federation, those coordinate states no longer remain sovereign states but become federal units under a common federal union. And the common federal union is called the country. In a federal country, the powers of the central or federal union are limited by certain powers secured to the federal units. Therefore, there exists a division of powers between the federal union and the federal units, clearly set down in the Constitution. Here, the Constitution acts like a treaty. Some powers will be reserved exclusively to the federal union, such matters as defense, state security, foreign policy, etc. and some powers will be allocated exclusively to the federal units, such as planning and the raising of local taxation, and others will be held on the basis of a partnership with overriding power, perhaps reserved for federal union. In such arrangements, it is necessary to make sure that neither the legislature of the federal units nor the legislature of the federal union can have the power to alter the constitution without some special processes being followed. And that process can be found in the constitutions. Therefore, in federal countries, a written constitution is a must. There cannot be a federal country without a written constitution. There will be occasions when disputes will occur between the federal union and federal units, and between the federal units inter se regarding their respective powers, which will require some authority to decide those disputes. And usually, the Supreme Court of the federal countries will decide those disputes. United States of America, Switzerland, Canada, Pakistan, and India are some examples of federal countries. All of these countries have written constitutions as well. So we can come to the conclusion that there are three main characteristics of a federal country. First, the supremacy of the constitution, by means of which the federation is established. Secondly, the distribution of powers between the federal union and the federal units. And third, some supreme authority to settle any dispute which may arise between the federal union and federal units. That supreme authority is usually the Supreme Court of that country. In contrast with a federal country, a country with a unitary form or a unitary country is one organized under a single central power over the whole territory of the country. The central power is supreme over the whole territory without any restrictions imposed by its divisional parts. And the powers possessed by the various divisions and districts of the country are held at the discretion of the central power. Here there is only one legislature and one executive, that is the central legislature and central executive. There is no other legislatures or executive in the country. Examples of unitary countries are the United Kingdom, France, and Bangladesh. There are also other countries of unitary system. In each of these cases, there is no question of any limitation being placed upon the central power by any lawmaking body belonging to any smaller part of the country. That is all relating to the classification of the Constitution. Thank you very much for listening.